Hey everybody, this month's roundup is brought to you by Fun Again Games. And hello. Maybe even Happy New Year, depending on when you're watching this, although I'm actually filming this on the 30th, so we're not quite there yet, but we are so close to making another full circuit around the sun, and somehow we made it. 2021 was certainly a very tumultuous year, but I am not here to talk about that. Actually, if you want, just a week ago, I did talk about 2021 at length in my top 10 games of 2021 preliminary edition, although as it turns out, it was more like a top 42 because I just couldn't stop once I started going. Anyway, though, today we are not looking back. 2021 is over, except for one thing: the month of December. Here's where I will give you the rundown on all the games my wife Jen and I played, and you'll also get to hear from Shea because he covered a game for the channel as well. So, without further ado, let's go over to Shea. Shea, take it away, buddy.
Hey folks, so I only played one game this year. I was really busy. I had a bunch of side projects. I also went to PAX and just holiday stuff in general. So only played one game, but that's okay because I got to play one of my favorite games of all time. This one right here, Spirit Island with the Jagged Earth expansion. Now I will shout this off the rooftops. I'll tell anyone who wants to listen about how good Spirit Island is. And Jagged Earth just adds a lot more of what makes Spirit Island great. Mainly the spirits. So Spirit Island is a cooperative game we were playing as the spirits who are protecting the island and its native inhabitants from colonialist invaders. And so to do that, you have these magical powers and employ, if you have the expansions, employ a bunch of different natural elements as well. So what Jagged Earth adds, a couple little things, this is some new tokens, some new powers, some more boards if you want to play with 5 or 6 players. But what it really adds, the real reason you buy it is because it adds 8 new spirits. These are wildly asymmetric player boards, that give you different player identities, and they completely change the way you play. They have different strengths and weaknesses, but the abilities themselves, the way that they play is so different from spirit to spirit that this game, it makes this game just endlessly replayable for me. I feel like I could grab 2 random spirits, maybe a random adversary or something like that, and I would always, every single time, have a different game. This game is endlessly replayable, and because it's one of my favorite games, I will happily play it. This game will stay in my collection forever. I'm going to say it right now. This game is never leaving my collection. I know that for a fact. There's 2 games that I can tell you I know for a fact never leaving my collection, and this is one of them. So that is the game that I covered this month. If you want to check out the run-through, please do. Or I also taught Spirit Island on my channel, RTFM. It was a while ago. I taught this game and Branch and Claw. Not Jagged Earth. Honestly, I don't think it needs a tutorial, but maybe I'll do it someday. But if you want to learn how to play, I think those are good resources. But in any case, I'll pass it back to you, Rahdo. But first, I'll just say happy holidays, happy New Year, and thank you all for watching. But like I said, back to you.
Okay, never say never, man. I feel like now I need to check into like an 85-year-old Shea far, far in the future and ask him, so how's that Spirit Island holding up? Because that's a pretty strong statement. Never say never. But I don't blame him. I mean, Spirit Island is amazing, and I was so happy that he was able to do a coverage of it because I actually covered it many, many years ago when I had a really ugly prototype. And that video has gotten tens of thousands of views, and always drives me nuts that there's not a good-looking, nice, professional presentation of the game on the channel. So when he was able to cover Jagged Earth, which, by the way, just went live this week, so definitely go check that run through out so you can see why Shea will never ever get rid of Spirit Island. Well, anyway, long story short, thank you, Shea. Shea will be back next month. He's got, in the new year, he's got definitely more stuff coming. And speaking of which, if you'd like to know what's coming in the new year, you can hit that eye up in the top right corner of the screen and go to the Coming Soon page, where I do my best to anticipate what we'll be doing in the coming weeks on the channel. But all that out of the way, it is time to move on now to what Jen and I played. And I break this into 2 halves. First, I'm going to talk about some expansions. We played expansions for the first time in quite a while this month. And then I'll actually get into standalone games. And these are both going to be countdowns, starting with my least favorite, ending with my most favorite. So let's get going, first of all, with my least favorite expansion of the month, which sounds bad, but it's not quite that bad. It's Mystic Vale Harmony. And I've got to say, both my wife and I love Mystic Vale, which is the card crafting game from AEG and designer John D. Clare, where it's a deck builder, but instead of building up a deck, your deck always stays the same side, and instead you're upgrading the cards inside your deck. It's always been brilliant. We've always enjoyed it. Plus, it's a really cool little push your luck game as well. And I finally got Harmony, which I've had for a couple of years to the table, and Jen loved it. I thought it was great. I think the main thing this new expansion adds is it just makes the game a bit more easygoing. It's much easier to avoid curses now, and the game just becomes a little bit more laid back and maybe harmonious. I think that's kind of the overall theme that's going on here, and my only problem with it was it almost made the game too easy. For the first time ever, and Jen and I, we've played this game a bunch, Jen was actually able to play her entire deck without busting, without spoiling. At which point, she pretty much won the game because I was still lucky I'm in Norville. And I do worry that in a two-player game where Jen got very lucky with drafting some cards, because every time one of these cards that got rid of cursed lands came out, I was not in a position I could get it. Jen grabbed all of them, and next thing you know, she's able to play her entire deck, and it got a little out of control then. So I suspect that wouldn't happen at higher player counts, because if multiples of these come out, players are all going to gobble them up instead of one player monopolizing them. But that was a problem we had in two-player. Doesn't mean we didn't still have a great time, but that's why Mystic Vale Harmony comes in at my number 5 of the month. Then we move on to number 4, Marvel Champions, The Hood. It's been months since I played some Marvel Champions. In fact, I've got a backlog of content, and I finally sat down and did a onesie-twosie. I took my number 4 expansion, The Hood, which is a villain expansion that you can play against, and went up and tried to take down the Hood with War Machine, which is my number 3 expansion for the month. War Machine is a hero that you can play as. Rodney Rhodes, Iron Man's best friend in the MCU, if you're familiar with them all. Anyway, though, I thought both of them were great. I really liked War Machine. Very cool new take on the character. Constantly as a soldier, just completely decked out with machine guns and rocket launchers and all that stuff. There's this new concept of having to build up ammunition and then spending your ammunition over time, which nobody else has really done. Very, very cool, very thematic, really interesting strategically. And then going up against the Hood, I enjoyed the Hood, my number 4, which is basically a villain who is very dynamic, because over the course of the game, the villain keeps bringing in random henchmen that join, and you can't really predict what way is this game going to evolve. So I like that idea, but in practice, it didn't seem like, it almost felt like, I know all these things are coming in, but the game could have just started with all that randomness. So I like the idea. It just didn't feel as strongly thematic as I would have. Plus, I gotta say, to the developers of Marvel Champions, could we maybe take a break with the Surge keyword for a while? Does anybody enjoy Surge? Because it really feels like you're leaning on it a lot, more and more and more, and it's just not fun. Make the individual cards more powerful. It is, anyway, that's just my 2 cents. That's why Hood came in at 4, War Machine came in at 3, really liked it quite a bit. But then we move on to my number 2 expansion of the month, The Lost Ruins of Arnak, Expedition Leaders. And oh my God, I cannot stress just how important an expansion this is, because I really dug Lost Ruins of Arnak. But I said at the time when I covered it, this is a big, sprawling, big board adventure deck building game where players are racing to find treasure, but also unearth ancient secrets from lost civilizations and all that. Very Indiana Jonesy type stuff, but done really well. Actually, really implemented in a very socially conscious way that I really appreciate. So anyway, Lost Ruins of Arnak is great. My only complaint with it was it kind of felt like the original box of Dominion. I like it, but I know I'm going to run out of stuff here. I'm going to need more cards. Welcome to Expedition Leader, which adds a bunch of new cards that do a bunch of really cool stuff. And that's what any kind of deck builder needs for its long-term health. And so I'm happy to see Expedition Leaders delivers there. Now, that's all I wanted. But what really blew me away were the Expedition Leaders themselves. Each time you play, you can pick one of several different leaders, which gives you a custom starting deck instead of a general starting deck. And each one of these leaders is so different. They really changed the gameplay up a lot. And Jen and I were really blown away by how fresh and new the game felt every time we tried a different one. Really, really impressed. I would say Expedition Leaders, I don't say this that often about expansions, but in this case, this is a must-have expansion. If you have Arnak and you like it or love it, you have to get this, because this took Arnak out of my top 150 games and brought it well into my top 100. It really bumped me up in my overall appreciation for the game, because Expedition Leaders is so fantastic. And it was my number 2 expansion of the month. But there's one more. My number 1 expansion of the month is Tapestry Arts and Architects. Now, I love Tapestry, and I know Tapestry is a bit of a Marmite game. Some people love it like me. Some people say it's just it's an overblown hype bag of a game, and I don't know what to say to those people. I'm very sorry you cannot enjoy this wonderful, super duper smooth, elegant, streamlined civilization building game. It's my second favorite civilization building game of all time. And yeah, I'm always down to play it, as is my wife. And there's so much variety. I know some people are upset with the initial balancing of the game, but that stuff has been largely addressed. And, just kind of like how sometimes video games need patches to address some balance issues. To me, it was totally fine. I'm just too busy having fun. I don't care if I win or lose. I just want to have fun playing the game. And Tapestry has always been amazing. But Arcs and Architects, again, like Leaders for Arnak, really elevates this and bumps it up quite a bit in my overall rankings, because what it does is it adds a 5th track. In the original game, you can focus on your military, on your technology, on your exploration, and on your science. Now, your 5th track is the arts. And no surprise, my wife, who is a professional glass artist, loved that. So thematically, we were certainly in a big, big way. But, thematic fondness aside, this arts track really mixes up the game. I mean, the game also comes with a ton of new cards, a ton of new civilizations, a ton of very cool ideas. Probably my favorite just mechanism overall that I really appreciate is, with this expansion, you have things to do with all those really wonderful little buildings that you build, other than just fill in a grid. They can be used in all kinds of ways, and that is awesome. That really broadens the game and makes what was already one of my faves of all time even higher ranked. Again, like Arnak, this is a must-have. No, Tapestry doesn't need an expansion, so I can't say it's must-have. Arnak really needed it. Tapestry doesn't need it, but I am so happy to have it, and I can't imagine I would ever play without my number 1 expansion of the month, Tapestry, Arts, and Artifacts. Okay. And now, folks, we're going to move on to the countdown for games of the month, starting with, at the top of my list, my number 12, Imperial Steam. And some of you are out there saying, what? Maybe you're throwing stuff at your screen. Maybe you're unsubscribing on the spot. Let me explain. This is definitely the definition of it's not you, it's me, Imperial Steam, because this game is absolutely brilliant. It's incredibly heavy. It might be the heaviest Euro game that my wife and I played this year, and it pulls it off. This is a brass Birmingham 18XX, one of those style games where you're generating goods, laying track, running your operation, dealing with investors to try to deliver stuff that you make in one city to another city on the rails that you have laid. We've seen this done in so many games. I mean, this is such well-trodden ground. Imperial Steam really mixes up the core formula in a lot of ways. There's a lot of really interesting new ideas here, and probably the most important one is the way it handles investors, because this is a very, very tight game. Money is so hard to come by, and if you make mistakes and bankrupt yourself, you could ruin your experience. But if you play smart, one of the ways you can make money is through drawing investors to your enterprise. But the thing is, to get that money out of your investors, to actually sell them shares, because the first step is get them interested, but then if you sell them your shares, what happens is you get that influx of cash based on your current share price, which is something you can control, but then you put them off in a little bucket off to the side. At the end of the game, they're going to need dividend payments. And what that means is, for every investor you sold your shares to get that influx of cash, at the end of the game, you lose 10%. A flat 10% of your final score. So if you actually sell to 10 investors, you will literally lose 100% of your score. You will score 0 points, which money is points in this game. This is so brilliant. It feels real. And it's so tension-filled. It's an absolutely amazing idea, because make no mistake, you will do it, and it will make you sweat. But hey, if I do it and you do it, we both did it once. but I feel like I need to do it a second time. Am I ready to give up 20% of my final score to get that cash I need right now to finish building this factory so that I can ship the stuff to that city before you ship that stuff to that city because we're both racing to get that bonus? It might be worth, killing all the birds in the bush to get this one in the hand right now. And I think it's brilliant. But as I mentioned briefly, this is a cruel and harsh game. If you make mistakes, you will regret it. There's no safety net. This game can really mess you up. And it's also a very, very heavy game. So it was just a little bit too much for me and Jen. I appreciate the brilliance of the design. So much so that next month, in the new year, I'm going to have Shea do a run through of Imperial Steam so everybody can see just how amazing it is. But it comes in at number 12 on my list because it was just too tough, rough and tumble. As much as I appreciate the design, like I said, it's not you, Imperial Steam, it's me, my number 12 of the month. Then we move on to number 11. Super Mega Lucky Box from Phil Walker Harding, if I recall correctly. And the reason I was curious about trying this is because recently, Rael Gaviola in the R&R show that we do every week, we had a top 10 games to take to family gatherings, and he listed this, and he really sold me on it as a roll and write that comes closer to traditional bingo than just about any other roll and write out there, but still turns it into a really interesting and satisfying game with a lot of, compelling decisions to make all the way through the game. And so Jen and I tried it out. We were both very impressed by it. We both really liked it. And I completely agree with Ruel. This is the epitome of a game that is easy to take and, show to first-time gamers and try to slowly convert them to the dark side. Come and join us. This is a great, great gateway game. And Jen and I really appreciate it. That said, it comes in at number 11 because while it has that great use, and I would certainly enjoy playing it anytime, there are so many other roll and writes that are so much heavier and richer and deeper. Your Hadrian's Walls, your Fleets, the dice games, your Pandoria Merchants. If I'm going to play a roll and write, I want to play something a little bit heavier. So this has a use. I would play this with my niece and nephew. I would play this potentially with my mother-in-law. But just me and Jen, as hardcore gamer geeks, it's just a little bit too light for us. So the brilliant Super Mega Lucky Box comes in at number 11. Then we move on to number 10, Evolution New World. And now bear in mind, this was a paid preview for a game that's going to be launching on crowdfunding in January, and I'm going to be doing a preview video of it then. So bear that in mind, but let me tell you folks, we have another. This is the third in a row of It's Not You, It's Me Evolution. I have always thought Evolution, ever since the first time I played it back, I think in 2013 or 2014, is a brilliant design, and it's gone through a lot of branching paths. This game has evolved as it has been licensed out to other publishers who have done completely new takes on it. And what we finally have here, Evolution New World, is the original development team coming back almost a decade later, making a completely new revamped version, adding so much cool new stuff. Really interesting new evolutionary traits you can give to your prehistoric creatures, which is what we're trying to do. This is a dog-eat-dog simulation where I'm trying to have creatures evolve to survive as best they can in prehistory, either by harvesting from the land or harvesting from my opponent by going carnivorous and eating all of your creatures and stealing all of your points. And that's the problem that I've always had with Evolution. I've always tried every iteration of it that's come out. I have always thought it's brilliant, and it's just gotten better and better and better over the years as it continues to evolve, as more and more designers put their stamp on it. And now, here's, we got this new one. I think it's the best iteration of Evolution next. But it's, as always, too hardcore and in your face and dog eat dog. So much of this game is all about me trying to destroy you and trying to protect myself because, hey, if you shoot first, then your carnivore will eat my carnivore before my carnivore can eat your big, fat, juicy, whatever it might be. So this is a big part of the game. It's a little too harsh for me and Jen, but here's the thing. Good news, everyone. You'll be able to find out more about this when the game goes live, in crowdfunding later this year. And at that point, my run-through will go up as well. I just described the basic game. Finally, after almost a decade, what I've been waiting for, solo and co-op play are coming. Now, I haven't gotten a chance to try either of these modes yet, but I suspect if I had, this would have gone from my number 10 of the month to probably my number 3 of the month. Because Evolution has been and continues to be one of the best modern designer card game systems ever. anywhere. I mean, it stands toe to toe with your Race for the Galaxies, with your Rays Arcanas, with your Terraforming Mars. This is some of the best card play you'll ever see if you enjoy head-to-head dog eat dog. If you don't, you might want to check it out when it goes on Kickstarter anyway, because if you're a Care Bear like me, co-op is coming. And so I'm so excited about that. But for now, just playing the basic rules, Evolution New World's my number 10 of the month. Okay, then we go on to number 9, Blazon, which is another paid Kickstarter preview. This, my run through for this will be going live when it goes live on Kickstarter, I think maybe next week, if I recall correctly, maybe in 2 weeks. Anyway, though, this is another very, very cool card game. There's 2 halves to this. It's got a very interesting card draft system, because what we're trying to do is emblazon all of our family crests by playing these cards to shields and following the true, real historical rules of heraldry. Apparently, a lot of focus was put into the development of this game to honor and be true to this medieval and Renaissance era art form that we are actually practicing. So half of the game is drafting, getting the right cards in your hand. The other half is getting them played to your shield, but there are some very interesting and challenging restrictions. The most important one is when you play a card to your shield, you have to align it up or down, and that alignment thereby affects every other card in that row. So I might want to put my second card lower aligned, but my first card upper aligned. If I do that first card upper aligned, I can't do it with second, unless I want to break the rules and then suffer a huge penalty. But I could break the rules temporarily. This is a really interesting thing. Unlike most of these kind of card/tile laying games, you put the thing down, that's it. You live with it till the game is over, you get your final score. One of the things that's most brilliant about this, you put the stuff down, you hit whatever achievement, whether you're trying to have fidelity or whether you're trying to be noble or whatever, you score those points for getting this, even if you break the rules to do it. And then later on, as you get more cards, you can override your previous things. It's like you can paint over your mistakes. And I love it. Now, this is really restricting and it's hard to pull off and the timing is tricky, but it gives you this whole extra level of complexity that takes this above and beyond a typical, 3x3, lay all your cards out in a grid thing. The fact that you can purposely make mistakes to get short-term games, but then fix them later if you can get the right cards to do it. And it's a gamble. And there's a lot of very, very cool stuff going on in my number 9 of the month, Blazon. Then we go on to number 8, Azul Queen's Gardens, which I'm just going to come right out and say it right now, folks. I believe I played every iteration of Azul, including the original one, and this is the best Azul has ever been. And I'll tell you why. One name, Castles of Burgundy. This is Michael Kiesling revisiting his super mega hit. I mean, Azul is one of the biggest hits of the last half a decade, and with good reason. The original Azul is a brilliant design. There's been really interesting takes and updates and tweaks. Some are very cool. Some actually maybe aren't quite so cool. But for my taste, Queen's Garden is so much better because you still have the same basic Azul tile drafting. It's been modified a little bit, but the same basic idea of how you get your tiles comes in. But now you take those tiles and you put them in a queue that feels straight out of Castles of Burgundy. And on future turns, you then place those out onto a growing hex board that feels straight out of Burgundy. And so Azul meets Castles of Burgundy equals yes, please. This is absolutely fantastic. I am not a big fan of abstract games, and Azul has always been a relatively abstract game, but I really enjoyed this because Castles of Burgundy is one of my favorite games of all time. So bringing these two great tastes and seeing how well they taste together is really fantastic. The only reason it doesn't rate higher, this is another one that would have easily made my top 5 of the month. But when I rate stuff, I also take into account my wife's predilections, and she thought it was cool. But I'll be honest, she would have preferred to play regular Azul. She just felt, it's interesting. I would say maybe the biggest thing that hardcore Azul fans might find a little lacking in Queen's Garden is it's a little bit more forgiving. It's not quite so hardcore. You can get stuff and you're less likely to put yourself in a spot where, oh wow, I am really in a bad scrape now. In this game, as you draft things, you might make some mistakes, but don't worry, you'll find a good use for those tiles later. It's a little bit more laid back, which is interesting. For me, that's also kind of a turnoff, but here, the Burgundy is so strong that I absolutely adore it. And again, for me personally, it rates much higher, but combining with my wife, it comes in at number 8 in a very, very good month. Of course, the last month of the year is going to be nothing but really great stuff because I'm playing some of the best games that have come out. And so, Azul Queen's Garden makes my number 8. Okay. Then we go on to number 7, Sriracha. Now, this thing came out of nowhere. I was contacted by the publisher in Thailand, and I said, sure, send me the rules. I get contacted by publishers around the world all the time asking, would you cover our game? And I read the rules, and 9 times out of 10, I say no, because either it wouldn't be a good fit for me in Gen, or because I just look at it and say, oh, I just don't think that's a very good game, or whatever it might be. So Sriracha contacted me, and I took one look at it and said, oh my gosh, I have to try this game, because the combination of mechanisms is just right up my alley. I have talked many times about how in love I am with entangled drafting. The idea that, hey, on my turn, I've got to take a bundle from all these options that combines one thing with another thing. And I want the one thing, but I don't want the other thing. That entwined or entangled drafting is brilliant, and it's so good here. Because what you're doing is you're grabbing a ship card that brings in construction goods you need to build buildings, and you also, at the same time, grab a blueprint to let you build buildings. Because what we're trying to do in this game is get the goods to build buildings to score points. It's a very simple, streamlined game. In fact, I mentioned in my run through, this feels kind of like in the same zone as Lost Cities or Azul or Sagrada. Really simple, elegant rules, but surprisingly deep gameplay. Because there are a lot of compromises. I take this ship because it's got the resources I need, but it gives me a blueprint that I can't build right now, but I gotta get this thing built. Because if you build up and you don't get your blueprints built as they come in, you start suffering huge penalties. But the other thing is, when you build those blueprints, you get bonuses that will help you combo string into other builds. And this game is really satisfying. You'll have to watch my run through to see why, but both Jen and I were very, very impressed, and this is definitely a keeper for us. My number 7 of the month, Sriracha. Then we move on to number 6, Savannah Park. Oh my goodness, Kramer and Kiesling, every time they get together, they make magic, and Savannah Park is no different. This one just barely missed, if I recall correctly. No, it was in my top 20 of the year. Didn't quite make my top 10, but that is no slight against it because it's such a beautiful, elegant puzzle. What you do is you set the game up. Everybody has their own board full of little tokens that have a bunch of savanna animals. Giraffes, rhinos, zebras, and impalas, antelopes. I'm not quite sure. Ostriches, and the tiles have combinations. There might be a tile that has an ostrich and a giraffe, and there's another one that just has an ostrich. There's one that has a giraffe. Everybody has the same tiles, and they put them randomly on their own board, so they have the same layout, and then when gameplay starts, I pick a tile. I pick my elephant ostrich tile, and I pick it up from where it is on the board, randomly where it was placed, and I put it in one of the empty spots. Everybody else has to find wherever they have that tile and do the same thing on their board. And I guarantee you, their board is very different than my board. And then my turn is over. And then you do the same thing, and you say, oh, okay, I'm going to grab this triple zebra tile, and I'm going to move it. And now, I don't want to move my triple zebra tile. My triple zebra tile is in a really good place. You're going to make me move this thing? And the tricky thing is, what we're ultimately trying to do is get groups of the same animals together, because your biggest group of elephants, your biggest group of zebras is going to score you points, especially if you can put in watering holes amongst them. So the trick is you're basically playing this kind of shuffling tile game, picking things up, moving them out of the way so that other things can go where you want them to go, and you have to do so much long-term planning in this game. It's so simple. I could teach the rules to you in less than 2 minutes, and about halfway through the game you say, oh my gosh, this is so deep! There's so much I have to consider! And that's my favorite kind of elegance, and that's what Kramer and Kiesling do so well. Actually, Ruel Gaviola, my co-host on the R&R show, every once in a while we do an RVR show where we stream playing each other in a competitive game. We're going to be playing an RVR of Savannah Park. I've got to put half of the game into the mail so I can send it down to him, and I cannot wait to play him because my wife has been destroying me, and I want to have a chance of winning. But anyway, Savannah Park is brilliant. Kramer and Kiesling at their best. It's my number 6 of the month. Okay, then we go on to number 5, Gutenberg. Now we're getting into the really high-level stuff, folks, because Gutenberg made my preliminary top 10 games of 2021. There's still some games from 2021 I haven't gotten a chance to get my hands on, so there might still be a few of them out there. It might not ultimately make it, but still, such a brilliant game. And the reason I love it, There's a lot of reasons I love it. I love the subject matter of running an early Gutenberg era printing press. I love the historical attention to detail. I love reading all the history about how women who ran their own printing presses at this time, the troubles they had to play. I love the special powers everybody gets depending on which character you play, which are, again, all based on real people. I love the simultaneous action selection. One of my favorite mechanisms of all time is everybody decides up front, right, how much initiative am I going to put towards all these different actions? Will I be able to get what I need to get, or will somebody else beat me to it? And everybody reveals at the same time. I always love that. But above all of that, what I really love is those sweet, sweet gears that represent investing in my printing technology. I snap them onto my board, and I give myself a Tzolk'in the Mayan calendar style little clockwork puzzle that every round I rotate all 1 or 2 or 3 tiles I've got, and that creates a unique combination of bonuses I can use for that round. And when I go to the next round, I'll rotate them all, and then all 3 gears will have a different combination of stuff. So the planning you have to do once you've got 2 or 3 gears, trying to get them in sync so they'll give you the right combo of bonuses at the right time, is brilliant. And it's a lot of fun. It's got great production value. I'm confident this will make a lot of people's best components of the year because, the way you invest in being able to print more books is you get these letter blocks. And these are real wooden letter blocks that could be used on a real Gutenberg era printing press. They went so above and beyond. They could have been just little cardboard chips, but they're real wood that you could actually use. It's amazing. Everything about this game is great. Jen and I both absolutely love it. It's my number 5 of the month, Gutenberg. Okay, but now let's talk about number 4, Kokopelli, from my favorite designer of all time, Herr Stefan Feld. Although, I wouldn't blame you for playing this game and saying, this is not a Stefan Feld game. This feels like nothing the man has ever done. And it's true. And that's one of the things that makes me love it so much. It's Stefan Feld. I think I've probably 30 of my 400 games are his designs. He's my favorite designer, and he can still surprise me by coming up with something so far out of the blue. This is a game of celebration. It's a very smart card-playing game where we're trying to play cards to start celebrations in our village that will give us special powers. The trick is, once I start a celebration, you, my neighbor, can play, if you've got the right cards, you can play those cards to my celebration and finish it. And then you'll score points. I'll get some passive points, and my special power will be gone. And that may sound like, some people think that's a really mean game. It's a mean-spirited game. I don't think so. Because the trick is, to finish a celebration, you need to play 4 matching cards to it. In my deck of cards, I only have 3. And then I have a few wilds that can go towards any celebration. So it's impossible for me to finish all of my celebrations. And sometimes I want those celebrations out of the way so I can make room for new ones because I got an even cooler special power. So sometimes I'm really happy if you finish this thing because I can't finish it and it's just wasting space and slowing me down. It's a brilliant design with all kinds of interplay between the player to your left and to your right. And it also works really well as a 2-player game. Now here's the interesting thing. I covered Kokopelli when it was on Kickstarter a couple of years ago, and I loved it then as well. And it makes, by the way, my top 10 games of 2021. The 2-player rules have actually changed in some pretty significant ways since I did my original prototype run-through a few years ago. And I had read on Board Game Geek, a lot of people who watched my old video said, we do not like the new 2-player rules. We wish they had left it alone the way it was in Rahdo's old video. And I thought, well, geez, okay, I guess I got to try this. I got to see what's the change. And I agree. It's a big, big change. I don't agree that it's a change for the worse. I just think it's different. I have to admit, I was starting to doubt Mr. Feld, Herr Feld, going in because I read the description. It's like, yeah, I don't know if I like that change from the sound of it. But when we played it, we thought it worked great. And having played both the old way and the new way, it's different, but it's not that the old way was better. It's just different. If anything, the new way pushes more interaction, and at the same time, I would say it's almost a little bit more friendly with the way it actually works out. So, long story short, hey, if you want to play the old way, it's pretty easy to replicate. Just go watch my original run-through as a how to play the old version. But I think moving forward, Jen and I will play it the new way, and we will love it to bits. My number 4 of the month, Kokopelli. Then we've got number 3, Pandemic Hotzone, Europe. Now, this is actually a combo. This is Pandemic Hotzone Europe plus Pandemic North America. These are 2 standalone mini Pandemic Express games. You can get a full experience of Pandemic, my favorite board game of all time, in a fraction of the time. And I thought both of the games are fine as standalones, but they're really simple, really light, and also way too easy. Even if you crank all the difficulty levels up, for an experienced Pandemic player, they're just too easy. So, on their own, North America and Europe, these two standalone games, would rate probably in the sevens, high sevens, which is kind of damning praise for me because I love Pandemic so much. But here's the deal. If you get both of these games, and the cost of both of these games is less than the cost of most standalone games today, because they're really, really inexpensive games. They are priced to move. If you combine them, you have a new Hemisphere variant. You have to download the rules for this variant on the Z-Man website, and if you're a Pandemic fan, I strongly suggest you do because it's brilliant. What happens is, it's for 2 players only. I'm playing the North American map, you're playing the Europe map, and we're both playing our own games of Pandemic. We're both controlling our own team. It actually kind of borrows the solo play mechanisms from Pandemic Fall of Rome. But here's the thing. It's not a solo game. It is still a cooperative game. Now, instead of 4 diseases, we have 6 diseases. 3 on one map, 3 on the other. Our powers still work. We can still share. We have a communal archive that makes it easier in some ways and harder in other ways to trade cards back and forth as necessary. And it's brilliant. I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it, which is saying something because generally I'm not a big fan of becoming a general where I control multiple characters. But here it was so good. I accepted it. But forget what I thought. My wife, Jen, she says this is likely her favorite way to play Pandemic, period. And we have played every iteration of Pandemic many, many times. We're both diehard Pandemic fans, and my wife really loves it. I love it. She really, 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 really loves it. This was her game of the month, and it's my number 3 of the month. Pandemic Hotzone, North America plus Europe with the official Hemisphere variant. Okay, now let's go on to number 2, Corrosion. Oh my goodness. Another one that made my top 10 games of the year. This is absolutely fantastic. And like the game I mentioned earlier in this roundup, Gutenberg, what I love more than anything else about this game is how it uses time, the passage of time through actual cardboard mechanisms on my board. Things that I have to rotate to represent things happening. And I have everything I do, every choice I make centers around trying to get the right assets into the right place to combo with other assets on a very, very harsh schedule that I am in control of. Time passage like Zulk in the Mind Calendar or Gutenberg, another one of my top 10 games preliminary of 2021, is I think fast becoming one of my favorite tropes in the board game industry, and Corrosion does it in such a cool new way with so many really interesting features, including, most importantly, the fact that you can control time in this game. Most of the time, games like this, time goes forward inexorably. You just have to deal with it. Here, if you make the right decisions, you can feel so powerful because it's up to you to decide when time moves forward. And it's so important to decide because as time moves forward, this is a steampunk factory that you run, and the steam is making all of your equipment, all of your engines corrode and rust and eventually seize up and die. You have to throw them away. So all your machines you build only have so much time, and the more time that passes, that's less time you have to use your machines. And even worse, the building components, the little cogs, they'll rust away too. And so you don't want to move time forward. You want to spend more time with your machines. But by the same token, this is a deck building game, and everything is driven by playing cards from your hand. And when you play a card from your hand, it doesn't go into a discard pile. It goes into the factory. And that engineer that you've played, you have to wait 2 or 3 or 4 turns of the wheel. This represents shifts, in the factory before you get them back. And you're desperate to get those cards back. So you're desperate to make the wheel move, but you're desperate for the wheel to stand still. And these two things create such an interesting tension. And on top of that, the game has so much variety. All these really cool special machines you can build that change up from game to game. Cool awards, unique bonus objectives you can be chasing after. And of course, the deck building can really mix up. And then on top of everything else, if all that weren't enough, this is a game that does a brilliant job of players being able to follow other players. It's an idea that goes back to Puerto Rico and earlier, but it's done in a really fresh new way here that I really love, that really leverages decks building in a very smart way. I love everything about this game. It was in my top 10 games of 2021, and I don't see that changing. It's my number 2 of the month. It's Corrosion, but there's one more, folks. Golem. Or I'm sorry, Golem, for folks who are bothered by such things. Although, apparently, if you live in Australia, it's officially pronounced Golem down there. So just imagine I'm down under. Anyway, Golem is another game that made my top 10 games of 2021, and I don't see that changing. This is a brilliant, rich, and vibrant design set in, telling the mystical story of of Jewish rabbis creating golems to help, save their people from oppression in, medieval Prague, if I recall correctly. Now, the game doesn't go into the dark elements of these mythic tales, but it does get to the heart of it, because the Golem stories are all about man's hubris and a power getting away from them, and that's a big part of this game. Because what we're doing in this game is we are actually building golems out of clay, animating them so that they can do tasks. The game doesn't talk about what the tasks are. Like I said, they kind of they try to keep the darker portions of this story out. So we just do tasks, which can score us points. That's great. But here's the thing: these golems are constantly gaining in strength and power, which is represented by them moving further and further to the right on the board, which means they get access to more and more cool special abilities that will help you. But at the end of every round, if you have not trained your students, if you have not given your student pawns enough knowledge so that they can move to the right on the board and keep up with the golems, then the golems are out of control and you lose tons of points. It's painful. So you have this really interesting conflict of, okay, these golems are going to get more powerful no matter what. So I've got to make sure I keep training my students to keep them going. But if that's all you focus on, you're leaving so much other stuff. There is so much to do in this game. And if you look at it, I know it's overwhelming. It's a board full of a billion icons, and it takes a bit to get your handle on it, but trust me, it does become second nature before your first game is over. The icons themselves, there's a lot of them, but they're all really simple. They're all get gold, get points, convert one thing into another. They're not that hard to figure out. It's just overwhelming when you first see it. It looks like an alphabet soup of stuff, but the actual language that is spoken through these icons is very straightforward. And an interesting thing about these icons, I really respect that publisher Cranio Creations actually went to a very respected Jewish scholar who was very, very big in the academic studies, and he reviewed everything they were doing to make sure they were handling everything with respect and authenticity, and he actually put his name on the game, signing off on it as a game that treats the subject matter well, authoritatively and respectfully, and that is awesome in and of itself. I want to rate the game up higher for that, just to reward Cranio for doing something that everybody in the industry should be doing now. That's a great element of Golem, but you can put all of that aside. If you don't care about any of the theme, this is one of the heaviest games Jen and I played this year. It is one of the best games we played this year. I absolutely love it. Just looking at it now makes me jonesing to play it again. And there's so much to talk about. Go watch my run through. I haven't even talked about the marbles. There's a marble shoot in addition to everything else that's going on. I could go on for hours, but I'll just leave it as saying Golem is my number one game of the last month of the year, 2021. And that's it, folks. Oh my goodness. Oh, Jen and I had a good time this month. Maybe a bit shorter list than in the past, but there was a lot going on in December. Hopefully you all had a good December. Hopefully happy holidays are in everybody's past, present, and future as we move forward into the new year. I will be back once again to do a roundup at the end of January, folks. And again, in the meantime, hit that eye in the top right corner screen if you want to see what's coming soon for the month of January for the new year for 2022. And otherwise, I hope you have a very, very nice day. Thank you very much for watching. And also, thank you to the sponsor of the show, Fun Again Games. Have a very nice day. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.